Okay, let's kick off. Thank you for joining. I hope you find the session useful. This is Darren Walton here from DVW Analytics, and what I'm going to take you through today is some methodologies and processes within Alteryx and using our DVW Analytics software that will help you to accelerate your migration from an SAP ECC system to an SAP S/4HANA system. I have on the call, but there'll be silent partners, Ian and Jai from our team. So if you have any questions as we're going, just feel free to add them into the questions box on the little pop out there you'll see, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go. Okay, let's kick off then. So in terms of the agenda, what we'll cover off is firstly, why use Alteryx and DVW Analytics software to support your SAP data migration. We'll also take a look at the actual data migration process and how our combination of software can help you with both the extract of data from your source SAP ECC system, how we can use Alteryx capability to review, cleanse and transform your ECC data prior to loading into SAP S/4HANA. We'll actually look at the mechanism for loading data from Alteryx into SAP S/4HANA. And we'll also look at some of the capabilities around reconciliation and reporting capability for data loading itself. Okay, so hopefully you'll get a good sense of what's possible using the combination of Alteryx and DVW there. We'll also take a little bit of a look at, how do we go about automating these processes. So once we've defined what data we're going to extract, how we're going to transform that data, then how do we actually go about automating that particular process? And I'll talk a little bit about the use of Alteryx Server in this particular scenario. And then for those of you who have already suffered through a few data migrations in your professional careers, the cutover weekend is always a period of high stress for everyone, and in the data migration context, particularly so, you may be spending long hours, late nights, have very red eyes, fueled with caffeine, looking at Excel spreadsheets. So how can we reduce the risk profile around the cutover weekend itself? And also we'll take a look at how we go about loading test data into the SAP system to actually test these different processes. So hopefully you'll find something within the agenda here that strikes your interest. Okay, so let's start with why use Alteryx and DVW Analytics in the first place. So many of you will all be very familiar with Alteryx, so I won't talk too much about it at the moment. You'll see it in the demonstrations. But Alteryx have a very flexible, very comprehensive analytic process automation platform, which can be used for analytics. It can be used for pure play process automation as well as data migration. And the block in the middle of the screen here shows some of the core capabilities within the Alteryx platform itself. And those which include things like the data preparation and profiling, the data blending in particular, play very well to data migration of SAP data. On the left-hand side, this is where we pull in extracting data from a whole range of different SAP systems. We'll focus on ECC today. And on the right-hand side, we're interested in what SAP systems we want to push data back into. And today, for our purposes, we'll focus on SAP S/4HANA. So let's take a slightly more DVW-centric view of this. And we'll talk about the breadth of our DVW integration platform. One of the key components of which is our connectors that work with Alteryx. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see a subset of some of the SAP products that we're able to extract data from. For our purpose today, again, we'll focus on SAP ECC. And on the right-hand side, you'll see I get a sense of some of the systems that we can write data back to. And again, we'll focus on SAP S/4HANA today. The SAP products here are just a very small number of the overall products that we support within the SAP platform. All right, so let's peel the onion one layer and let's look at the depth that our platform offers. On the left-hand side, across all those different SAP systems, we support the extracted data from a very wide range of SAP sources. From a migration perspective, two are particularly interesting to us and two are most relevant to us. First one is the ability for us to extract data from SAP tables. Right? This forms the basis for any real data migration. The second one here is SAP attachments. So when we talk about attachments, what we're referring to here are the documents, maybe a PDF file or an Excel sheet or a graphics file image that is attached to a piece of master data or transactional data in the SAP system that you would like to be able to extract and pass and load into your target system. Okay, all the other capabilities are covered in a lot of detail both on our website and various other content that we've put out in video format. On the right hand side, we talk about some of the right mechanisms that we support. From a data migration perspective, the two most relevant ones will be IDOC and OData for the SAP cloud-based solutions, as well as SAP BAPI, but perhaps to a lesser extent. In our session today, we'll focus on the usage of data from tables and then the loading of data through IDOC. Okay, that's what we'll focus on today. This slide hopefully will give a sense of the scope of our platform. All right, so I promise this is the busiest slide and it's the only one like it in the deck, so just bear with me. But what we're seeking to do through this combination of Alteryx and DVW is to reduce the cost, the time and the risk associated with an SAP data migration. Now, a lot of our business users that we've engaged with in the past often complain that the overall migration process is quite opaque. It's not clear to them what the status is at any given point of time, and consultants can often be guilty of the old smoke and mirrors, particularly things aren't going so well. So through this use of Alteryx and DVW, we're looking to provide enhanced transparency and visibility of the overall migration process for the business sponsors and business users. So when they sign off against that migration, they can do it with a high level of confidence. We're also seeking to manage the entire migration process within a single environment. So today, other tools, there's proliferation of disparate tools and techniques that are used to support data migration. Everything that's required from a data migration standpoint can be delivered through Alteryx and DVW. Okay. Another key thing here, traditionally, the data migration design phase kicks off, an army of developers is recruited, and they start churning out extract, load, reconciliation reports. People working very hard to deliver something to a customer, but this takes weeks, if not months of effort. And it's an easy win for us within Alteryx and DVW. We don't need that army of developers. We can use the tools built into Alteryx to support this entire process. This will sound like it's kind of nonsensical to you, but using the combination of our tools, you will be able to start extracting and analyzing the data on day one. On day one, right? So I guess if you like, the time to value is very, very fast using this combination of tools. Within Alteryx, we have a workflow kind of concept, right? And if you haven't seen Alteryx before, you'll get a sense for how these workflows work. They're quite visual, and all our workflows will operate from left to right. So you'll see how different steps in the workflow work. And from a data migration concept, you'll see how the data is being extracted, how it's being transformed, how it's being manipulated, and so on and so forth. These workflows, you can define them once, and then you can use them for your test environment, your quality environment, your test environment, your production environment, without any further changes. You simply point the workflow to the appropriate SAP system, right? So there's no migration of code through those different landscapes because we work outside into SAP. We'll also be able to use the same workflows that you use for your loads and transformations for delta loads as well. So you just append those workflows, some additional logic. So it's a less of an effort to build for deltas. You'll also see we have some simplified approaches to migration, reporting, particularly around reconciliations. And what we're going to show today is the whole thing, right? The extract, the review, the cleanse, the transform, the load, the reconciliation and report, all those stages, and you can do that with Alteryx and DVW. But you will decide how far you want to go with this. For you, it may be sufficient just to extract and review the data from your SAP source systems, or later maybe your SAP target systems. Yeah, or maybe you'll just want to do use these tools for reconciliation and reporting. If you go the whole hog, you can do it. Right? from extract right through to final reconciliation and reporting. All right, so let's take a look then at the migration process, and this is how we're representing it here. So on the left-hand side, we have our source SAP ECC system. We need to extract data from that system, okay, and we want to work with it within the Alteryx platform. On the right-hand side, we have our target SAP S/4HANA system. So what do we have? We'll have an extract process, we'll have a review, cleanse, and transform process, we'll have a load process, and then for reconciliation reporting, again, we'll have an extract process, only this time an extract from both the source ECC system as well as the target SAP S/4HANA system. And that can be done during the migration process itself, or it can be done at the end of the migration. So how you choose to use the reporting and reconciliation is really up to you. So we provide a large number of predefined extract and load workflows. Right? I've listed some of the workflows that we provide. There are more than listed here. These are all based on the SAP best practice approach, and literally you can install Alteryx, you can install the DVW solution, you can load these workflows, get connected to your SAP system, and you can start extracting data. You do not need to have SAP knowledge at all to run the extract workflows because we've done all the work for you. Okay, no extract reports here to develop either. So let's take a look at the first phase of this process then, the extract of SAP ECC data into Alteryx. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, I'll take you to this workflow live in just a second, but this is our predefined workflow for the extract of customer master data from SAP ECC. And if you're already familiar with Alteryx, you may look at this and think, hang on a second, these are all Alteryx tools here, but bear with me, you'll see the DVW tools shortly. So what we've chosen to do here, because of this particular workflow, we're going to make use downstream of SAP IDOC to load that data into the SAP S/4HANA system, is we're extracting data from the requisite SAP customer data tables, the master data tables, and we're writing that data to Alteryx database files. And the naming convention we've used here, if you know a little bit about SAP and about IDOC, you'll notice that the naming convention we've used to name these different database files aligns with the IDOC segment names. Okay, so it just makes it easier for us to use further downstream, right? So the output will look something like this if we have a large volume of data that we're extracting. Now, you could equally push this out to Excel if you wanted to, or some other format. We like the Alteryx database format because it's not subject to the same limits or limitations as Excel. Okay. So let's just come into Alteryx here, and let's look at a workflow. So I'll run this one a bit earlier, and I'll walk you through it. So at this top level here, the most important thing is the macro blob, right? So what we're doing here is we're using a macro, and I'll show you the workflow that sits within this macro in just a second. I'm just passing into this overall macro the details of my SAP source system and also ultimately the target system, and just for convenience, I just entered a short range of customer numbers, just 2 customers, right? We don't need to show you millions here, just to show the principle, okay? So when the workflows run, we're pulling data from the KNE1 table, the KNVV table, the KNVP table, and so on and so forth, and we're pulling the data for those specified records, right? So this is an approach for us to perform like mass extracts, where all the data from all the fields in all the tables will be extracted. Using our tools, you can also do much more selective types of extracts where you can cherry pick the fields you want and so on and so forth, but here is intended for somebody who doesn't really understand maybe SAP, and their only job is to run the workflow, all right? So let's take a look inside this macro here, and you can see a slightly more sophisticated workflow appearing, where we're extracting data from the KNA1 tables, the KNVV and KNVP tables, and so on and so forth. And the mechanisms we're using within Alteryx here are allowing us to just freely request, freely run the workflow without us having to worry about the selection criteria and how these different tables relate to each other. All right. If I open up this other one here, with another macro, you'll start seeing some of our tools. All right, this is our table data read tool. And we're using this kind of approach so that it could equally well be used by customer, as vendor, as material master, again, without the user having to really understand how the data is stored in the SAP system itself. So when the workflows run, I'll come back to our main one. Oops, not that one, this one here again. Okay, and if we look at, say, one of these output files, just a simple one here, we start getting the data in a format that we can start working with within the Alteryx environment. Okay, again, this is a fire and forget. Give me all my customer data, please. Thank you very much, and then off you go. All right. So, two kind of ways in which we can pull data. We can use this mass extract workflow, like I've shown you there, or we can use other workflows to allow us to really refine, maybe pull certain data from specific tables, specific fields. And the workflow I've shown you, again, will pull all the data against all the fields for all the records you specify against the custom master data object. Right? The benefit of that is, as I say, from day one, install Alteryx, install DVW, Alteryx connectors, load up those workflows, connect to SAP, run, and the data's been extracted for you. Nice and easy. All right, so we've got the data. All right, and in our world, we're storing those data in those Alteryx databases. So now we want to look at how do we go about reviewing, cleansing, and transforming that data. So let me show you a couple of things here. So firstly, within Alteryx, there's a ton of capability native to Alteryx. So I've got a database file here where I did a much larger extract of my custom master records. You can see that's almost 7,000 records here. And what Alteryx provides you is a number of standard tools for you to just start understanding, okay, what's the quality of that data? Where do we have duplicates? What shall we maybe be focusing on? So using some of these Alteryx tools here, the simple browse tool, for example, against the output of this particular workflow, where I can get to see a sense of, where data exists against certain fields, where there may be entries or nulls, and so on and so forth. So I get an early visual, both on this sort of profile screen within the Alteryx itself, or if I look at the output from my workflow, you can see the different columns are being color-coded according to the quality of the data within it. Alteryx also provide tools for us to do further analysis of the data. So here, for example, I can get a sense of, that's not a very good one, here we go, this is better. Yeah, where records exist, the percentage of records with missing values or unusual values. Again, it's giving me information about the data that I've extracted from the SAP system. Yeah. And final one down here, I get a sense of sort of the metadata associated with the data that's been extracted. So the point I want to get across here is that using standard Alteryx tools, I can start understanding what is the quality of the data that I've extracted from the SAP system, where do duplicates exist, where are fields simply not populated in any of the records that we have extracted from the SAP system. And all these can give us clues as to, okay, what data is important, what should be migrated, what should we be looking to cleanse or work with further downstream. Okay, so this area here, this kind of review, cleanse, transform is very much a consulting piece. We need to understand our SAP systems, both the source system as well as the target system. I need to understand where we've made deviations or changes in the target S/4HANA system. Perhaps I've changed how material types are structured or customer groups or sales areas. Right? So there's a degree of work that we'll need to do, and we can do this all within the Alteryx platform here. If we look at another one of these workflows. Okay, so in our particular scenario, there are two things we want to do to our data. In the first instance, we want to be able to remove the contact person number that may be associated with the customer master record, because we want to rebuild that from scratch within the S/4HANA system. All right. So in this particular little workflow here, this part of it, we're reviewing the data that was extracted from the contact person data that is extracted from the ECC system, and we're simply removing the link with the contact person number, and then we're writing it back to our Alteryx database file, and that'll be used in the next workflow in the process. Right. In this other workflow here, we have different mappings in the two systems. So in ECC, our region codes, we want to map those to the ISO region codes in S/4HANA. So again, I'm pulling the appropriate database that we extracted from the SAP system. We have a mapping table here that we've defined that provides the mapping for us. And when we run this workflow, it'll actually update any appropriate entries in our data. So if we just run this workflow here, okay, this will run very quickly, no connectivity upon the data we've already extracted, and we get the data into a shape whereby we can start using it further downstream. All right. So this phase then, this particular part of it, the review, the cleansing, the transformation, this is key, and this is where the consulting is required. This is where you need somebody who understands SAP, understands the setup of your particular SAP system, understands where there are differences between the configuration in those two different systems. Okay, so review, cleanse, transform, right? I've talked about that in about 5 minutes. You can imagine that there's going to be a significant amount of work for you to do here, but less so than if you start cranking out ABAP reports to perform it. And it's easy to make adjustments in these Alteryx workflows. Yeah, if our mapping isn't quite right, we can adjust it and rerun the workflow again. Right? I don't have to again move everything through the different SAP environments. Okay. Now we want to load data. We've extracted it, we've cleansed it, we transformed it, and now we want to look at loading that data. So I'll walk you through this workflow in just a second, and I'll execute it so you can see what's going on. Okay. So at first glance, this kind of looks like the reverse of the first extract workflow. Right? What we have here is we have all those database files where we've extracted that data, we've cleansed it, we've transformed the data. Right? So this is now ready to be loaded into the S/4HANA environment. Our work takes place within this macro here. Just try to find it quickly. This one here. Okay, so this is where our IDOC write tool comes into play. Okay, so we use an IDOC here. This could be OData. It could even be BAPI at a stretch, but IDOC is kind of the standard way to do these sorts of things. So let me take you through what's happening in this particular tool. Firstly, we need to identify the IDOC message type that we're going to use. Right. Once we've done that, and we do that by doing a search through Alteryx into the target SAP S/4HANA system, and we have all the IDOC message types available to us, including any custom ones that may be defined in there. When we identify and select the message type that we're going to work with, then all the metadata associated with that IDOC message type are retrieved into this input mapping view within Alteryx. You can see here on the left-hand side, all these kind of white colors, right? This is all the definition of this particular segment within that particular IDOC type, all right? I'll show you the others in just a second. And then we've done a mapping based upon the data that we're providing to the IDOC type. So we're field names are different between the two different systems, we may use some of the transformation capability within Alteryx to adjust those, for example. Where they're the same, there's nothing for us to do, right? What we also need to do, and we'll do within here, is we'll work with the specific IDOC segments that we're going to use to load the data. Right? The customer one is a good example because it's quite a complex IDOC structure. Some of the data or some of the segments you will want to use, some you may not need to use. Our templated workflow here again is based upon the SAP best practice IDOC definition for customer. And you'll see that if I look at a couple of these sales data, you'll see the fields changing. Let's come further down, let's see to maybe contact person. Again, the field's changing. So there's a mapping that needs to take place for each of these. Now the good thing is, in our tool, is if our field names are aligned, and we've done that through the Alteryx workflow, then we can use this auto map function, and that simply happens automatically, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay. What we'll also need to specify in the setup of this is what we call the segment keys, because those of you who know IDOCs will be familiar with the fact that IDOCs, the segment's kind of hierarchically structured, and when we send the data to SAP, we want to ensure that that hierarchy is maintained. Yeah. Now, if your system is quite standard, you will be able to run this particular part of the workflow as is without much modification. If you have a highly customized system, you may need to adapt it slightly, but it will give you a really good starting point for the loaded data into the SAP S/4HANA system. So what happens then when we run this particular workflow? Okay, the data is flowing from our source files. All right, it's been passed into the macro, and then you may have noticed also that we name the individual links from the source files, and we give them the same name as the underlying IDOC segment. And that enables Alteryx to know that when we run this workflow, data for K and KKM will flow to the K and KKM segment, right? And that's how how that will work for you. All right, so let's just run this here. Our system hasn't been the fastest today, so let's just give it a go. It might take a little while to run. Look in my S/4HANA system here, and let's just see what it's sent across. Right. Let's take a look at the IDOC list. Okay, that looks quite good. Let's double click on this one. Make that a bit bigger. And we can see the IDOC structure. And this is the particular record that I've transferred from SAP ECC into SAP S/4HANA. And you can see from the structure and the naming of these IDOC segments, you can see the hierarchy that's maintained through our configuration within Alteryx there. Yeah. Let's just see if we can actually see that record now. It's gone already. Now, how you handle the process in the IDOC once it's been generated will largely depend upon the setup within your SAP system. So are we going to process these straight away, or will we batch them up and send them later as a background job? And here we can see the record that is transferred from SAP ECC into SAP S/4HANA. All right. Elegant process. We're making use of IDOC here in a confirmed, clearly established way of integrating with an SAP system. So what do we got to this point then? We have standard predefined workflows that allow you to extract data without any knowledge of SAP at all. All right. And covers our standard ones cover all the main master data objects and all the main transactional objects that you may want to migrate from one system to the other. We have standard workflow that will allow you to load data by IDOC into your target SAP S4HANA system. Here you are going to have to understand how IDOCs work, what's been configured in your SAP S4HANA system. Okay, are there any IDOC extensions that need to be accommodated? So at best, the workflow I've shown you could be run as is, or at worst, it provides you with a good starting point for then extending it to adapt to your specific requirements, all within Alteryx. Right. Okay, so essentially what we've done here then is we've had a custom master record, and again our extract was just for a couple of records, but this could be thousands, hundreds, millions. Okay, the process is exactly the same, and the way that Alteryx defined their platform and the way that DVW software integrates that platform is volume is not an issue. Okay, it's just for convenience I did 2 records rather than a million records in the demonstration. So what we've been able to very cleanly do for that process is extract the data from the SAP ECC system. We've defined transformation rules for that. We then executed the load function, which is taking the data, it's converted it based upon our rules. We then generated the IDOC within the SAP S4HANA system. The IDOC is successfully processed, and then the data is reflected and appears within SAP S4HANA. Yeah. Now we're doing this as separate steps here. Yeah, we're doing extract is one step, review, cleanse, transform is another step, and then load is another step, right? Because that's typically the way you're going to work. But if you have simpler objects that you need to migrate, you could do that in one single continuous workflow. So we extract the data, we transform it, and we load it all in a single workflow. So again, you have some choice as to how you want to structure things using this suite of tools. Okay, so from a reporting and reconciliation perspective, this is often where our business sponsors and business users may be flying a bit blind, and they want to know, what is really happening as part of migration. Where are we really with this? Where are the failure points in the migration? So we can do this quite simply again within Alteryx. I'll show you this. So from a reconciliation and reporting perspective, there's a couple of things I'm going to want to do. One is I want to better pull data from the SAP S4HANA system, yeah. But also from a reconciliation perspective, I may want to also validate that the data we pulled from SAP ECC has indeed been transferred to SAP S4HANA, and get assessment. Okay, how far along the process are we? What still needs to be done, and so on and so forth. So we provide the hooks into SAP for this through Alteryx. Alteryx has its own reporting capability, so you could be producing reports for the reconciliation process directly within Alteryx, or perhaps if you have some dashboards, maybe via Power BI or Tableau, they want to use to communicate with business sponsors about the progress of the migration process, then you can do so. So using what I'm about to show you now, we could do this ongoing basis. As the migration is running, we can be running these kind of reports, or you may do it just at the beginning and end of your overall process. So let me show you this workflow here. Okie dokie. All right. So I've got a couple I just talked through, and I'll actually run this third one down here for you. So the first report we've got here running this particular workflow is going to capture any errors in IDOCs. All right. So as we're running these workflows, let's just make sure there are no problems. Is the IDOC mechanism working correctly? Make sure after all of our testing we haven't sort of missed anything critical. So we can use the DVW tools within Alteryx to read the appropriate IDOC tables and generate a report that says, okay, these IDOCs have failed or these IDOCs have succeeded. And that will give us a chance to then go and identify where the errors occurred, correct those errors and repeat the process, or reprocess the IDOC, whatever approach you choose to take. What we can also do is kind of mass reconciliations. So here we have a workflow that will look at the KNA1, say tables, in both your source ECC and your target S4HANA system, and we have a reconciliation tool here that will reconcile against all of the fields in that table for both systems, right? This is a good endpoint because that'll give us complete confidence that the migration has been successful. But what I also want to do is just run some ad hoc reports and say, okay, look, do the custom numbers look right? Are we talking about the right numbers? What is still hasn't been migrated? What exists in ECC but not in S/4HANA at this point in time? So we have a very simple workflow here. I'll show this one just now. Let me just deactivate or disable these two quickly so they don't take up any time. All right. So in this particular workflow, let's take a look. All right. This is called a SAP logon tool. It exists in all the other workflows, but it's kind of hidden from you in those. So the SAP logon tool is typically used in any workflow that you'll use with the ACS, and this is where we establish the connectivity between the different SAP systems that we want to work with in a given workflow. So here, for example, I've chosen to connect to our source SAP ECC system along with our target SAP S/4HANA system. All right. Implication here then, outside of data migration, is that in a given workflow, I can be using or working with data from multiple different SAP systems. So if you have a complicated SAP estate, it's a real boon to be able to do this. I then dragged on and used our table data tool because in this particular workflow, I want to be really laser, get in there with the laser and just pick only those fields I'm interested in and maybe apply some filters to only select a subset of records or based upon maybe customer number or customer group or some other filter criteria. So I've established and searched for the table name in ECC. I selected the fields that I want to extract here and I've applied some simple filters to that. So it's got a range of custom numbers here. In my second part of this workflow where I'm connecting to the S/4HANA system, and you can see that I've chosen it here. We've chosen the same table name, exactly the same fields, and applied exactly the same filter criteria. Yeah. So let me just run this. So as this runs, I'm pulling data from ECC, I'm pulling data from SAP S/4HANA, that's been pulled into Alteryx. I just then got a simple join tool here within Alteryx where we're going to join the data and the number ranges between our ECC and SAP S/4HANA system. So the custom number is perfect for this. You can see the configuration up here. So just a link on the custom number. And then I have my three outputs. So the top one here gives me a list within that range of those customers that exist in SAP ECC, but not in SAP S/4HANA. The bottom one here shows me that there's no overlap there. And then the middle one shows me where we have records that exist both in SAP ECC and SAP S/4HANA. So these are the records that effectively have been migrated between the different systems. Okay, a simple example, but it's actually very, very powerful. And this can be run, as I say, ad hoc, on the fly, or ultimately scheduled to run in background as you need to. And then through Alteryx, given the capability of Alteryx, yeah, I could do the reporting within here using some of these reporting sorts of functions and features, but perhaps I'll push the data out to one of the more recognized visualization platforms for reporting. Okay, so report, reconcile, the data loads. Okay, so hopefully get a sense of what we can do with the process. All right, so if you're familiar with Alteryx, I don't need to tell you how rich Alteryx is. What we've tried to do here is make it as easy as possible for you to start that migration process early, as easy as possible for you to get those extract workflows running on the most important objects within the SAP system without you having any knowledge of that SAP system. In the cleanse and transformation phase of the process, yes, you need to have some knowledge of the source and target systems. You need to understand the data in the systems, like you would do in a conventional sort of migration scenario, and then also how the config changes so we can perform the appropriate types of mappings and transformations of that data. Okay, we then run the actual load itself. Okay, and we've chosen in our scenarios here to use IDOC because it's so well established, and we have predefined workflows to allow you to do that. For the IDOC piece, you need some knowledge of IDOC for sure to make it work properly. There's maybe some settings you'll need to perform in your SAP S/4HANA system to enable and create ports and these kind of things. So it's a boon to do it and to have it. And then we have the full capability of Alteryx combined with the DVW tools there to perform reconciliation of the migration, right? Whether it's track and see where IDOCs have failed or succeeded, or to actually eyeball specific table objects and understand what the difference is between the two different systems. All this within a single platform. So what about automation of this, and why do we want to do that? Well, some of these extracts are going to involve very large tables. They may take quite some time to run. You know, you'll be busy building out your SAP S/4HANA environment, but if we're pulling extracts from the production systems, perhaps you'd like to schedule these for later in the day, particularly the large volume ones. Or maybe you want your users to add a ad hoc request an extract to take place, but without having to worry about how to use Alteryx directly. So Alteryx Server here comes into play along with the Alteryx Gallery. So what would happen here if you bring this in? So within Alteryx Designer, our component is called the ACS of Alteryx Designer, right? And that allows us to build, test, run those workflows locally on a desktop. And that may be sufficient for your needs. If you want to start automating those, Server comes into play. So what we then do is then publish those workflows to Alteryx Server, and you'd also need to have our ACS for Alteryx Server component installed. So when the time comes for the workflow to run, Alteryx Server triggers the workflow automatically based upon the schedule parameters. We then request data from the SAP system in a similar vein to I showed you in the first workflow, and then we extract that data from the source ECC system into Alteryx. Right? Similarly with the load, if we want to schedule the load of data, so we're not so it runs maybe overnight. Again, build and test those workflows on Alteryx Designer. Once we're ready, we'll publish those to Alteryx Server, and then the user can either run it ad hoc at a certain time or according to the schedule. When the time hits, Alteryx Server triggers the workflow. Our workflow will communicate with the SAP S/4HANA system and write the data to it. Okay, and then also the reconciliation reporting could also be scheduled or run ad hoc via Alteryx Server as well. So there's a lot of benefit to using the server in this particular scenario. Okay, so classically with big data migration projects, there's a lot of pressure on the cutover weekend to get that data in. Yeah, and you know your classic go, no-go decisions. And at this point in time, it's largely going to be, you know, is the data there, and has the business signed off against the data in the target system? So how can we reduce the risk profile around the cutover weekend itself? So using some of the workflow approach I've shown you previously, we don't have to wait to the last minute to run those workflows for the extract and load in particular. This can be done substantially ahead of time. All right, and then what we can do is we can use one of two mechanisms. We can either then use a real-time update of SAP S/4HANA based on changes in SAP ECC. So in this particular scenario, what will happen is we're talking about customer master records today. So a customer master record has been created or changed in the SAP ECC I can't say ECC, sorry, SAP ECC system. But we've already done that initial load, right? And that's so S/4HANA already has some of that data in there. So the data's changed or created. So what can happen is within SAP, we trigger from that change a communication with our Alteryx server. Alteryx server receives that communication from the SAP ECC system, says, run the workflow. Alteryx server automatically runs that particular workflow, and that workflow will then enable the load of that change data into SAP S/4HANA. All right, so I could be quite happily then over cut over a weekend just sipping my coffee, because pretty much the data is already migrated. We did an initial load some time back, and in the intervening period up to cutover, we've just been sending updates in periodically as they happen in SAP. So the two systems are synced and aligned, and for us it should just be a nice checkbox activity at the end of the cutover weekend. So this is one way of doing it, okay, real-time updates. Second mechanism here, the output or the outcome's the same. It's just so actually, you know what, we don't really want to do the real-time. What we'll do is we'll schedule a workflow to run, maybe late at night when things are a bit quieter, and we'll pick up any changes. So any changes to existing records or any new records that have been created, and if they're relevant for SAP S/4HANA system, we'll move them through the landscape into SAP S/4HANA. So we'll either do real-time updates or a scheduled type of updates. So it's kind of like a delta type of approach, but the delta will also accommodate the creation of new records as well. This will also allow me to just be sipping my coffee during the cutover weekend, because the data between the two systems has been migrated and is aligned. Okay, so I've got a little recorded demo of this. I'm not showing this live because our server's going under a bit of maintenance at the moment. So let me just show you this. So in the top left, this is my SAP ECC system, and the bottom right is my SAP S/4HANA system, and on the left-hand side is my Alteryx server. So I'm just changing a record in SAP ECC here, saving that change. Okay, coming back to S4, and as that refreshes, you'll see that the customer migration workflow is now running. So that is triggered automatically from the change to the data in SAP ECC. All right, this will run away, and our S4 system wasn't too fast today, so this will take a little while. Just refresh that again. Okay, the workflow's run. Happy with that. Let's go and look at the business partner record now in the SAP S/4HANA system. Select that record. This is the slow bit. And you can see the data has been migrated, right? So I have consistency between the two systems, right? And that's run automatically. No human intervening. Change has been registered. It's triggered an Alteryx workflow, and that's triggered the IDOC, and then subsequently the update of the customer master record in SAP S/4HANA. Very, very, very powerful, right? So using this approach, then I think we can have an easier cutover weekend. Remove some of the risk, and also remove the emphasis on the data migration, because it always hits critical path. We know it does. Okay. So what I've shown you then is the overall process, right, and how it can be implemented within Alteryx, using Alteryx and DVW's Alteryx connector for SAP for both extract, transformation, cleanse, load, report, delta mechanisms. Right. One final thing just to show you, I think a few more minutes left, is what about when we started this process, and maybe we're going to launch directly into our full extracts and loads at this point in time. We have an environment built, and we want to be able to generate some test data for us to work with to support the migration activities. So what we have is three mechanisms through which we can do this. We can create data through IDOC in the similar way as to our loads, but it requires a little bit of knowledge of IDOC. We can also use BAPI where BAPI is available for that, and also you need some knowledge of BAPI to make that work. But if I'm sort of in the business user camp and I just want to get some data in there quickly, then we have an ACS or Alteryx rather, RPA tool. And what our RPA tool does, it allows us to work with SAP GUI scripting and HTML scripting from within Alteryx. Okay, so if I come back to my Alteryx environment, and let's just see, where's it gone, my RPA one here. All right, so if I look here, so this is our SAP GUI RPA tool. You can see we also have them for HTML and also for Windows. So the scope of this will operate outside of pure play SAP, but SAP is what we're interested in today. And what this particular workflow is going to do is we've previously recorded a script. So this is SAP GUI scripting that many people will be very familiar with. We've recorded a script. That script has then been is being consumed within the Alteryx workflow here, and we're able to parameterize that particular script. And this script is going to help us to create customer master record data. So let me just get my other system up here and make the window, not that one, on the little blue one. So what this script is going to do is going to trigger the creation of a couple of customer master records for us. And if I just reset this to its starting position. Okay, let's just run this workflow. And you can see now the script is taken over, no hands here. So using SAP GUI scripting, I'm starting to load data into in this case, the SAP ECC system, ready for me to use as part of migration testing. Okay, this is lots of use cases beyond data migration, of course. The capability exists within our platform. So today then, I've shown you a number of tools. I've shown you obviously Alteryx, which most of you will be familiar with. I've shown you our core Alteryx connector for SAP, and in particular our table data tools to extract data from SAP tables. I've shown you our SAP IDOC tool, which allows you to load data into SAP environments using IDOC. And I've also shown you here our SAP GUI RPA tool, which works with SAP GUI scripting. If you're using Fiori or some other application, then you just use the HTML RPA tool here, which is sort of system application agnostic. Okay. All right. So, look, I hope you found that useful and have a sense of what is possible with Alteryx and the DVW Analytics connectors for SAP. We're seeing this for existing customers, right? Single platform, common platform, no disparate tools. You can successfully migrate from ECC to SAP S/4HANA. You can reduce the time required for the overall process. You can completely remove the need for all those custom reports that are classically written every single time you run a project, right? And you have workflows that are completely repeatable across different SAP environments as well. So I hope you found it useful. Please come visit us at DVW Analytics. I will send a follow-up email after the event, along with various other links and things that would be useful to you, along with my contact details. But thanks for your time, and yeah, appreciate your interest.